moment, let's start the show.
I was about to say, because I usually see 2 lines. I was like, no, he knows what he's doing.
For the folks at home, I started recording the show, but it was only me being recorded, which honestly would make for the better show. If you could just like distantly hear Keith in the back of my microphone. Ooh.
It's just a subtle way to start fizzling me out.
Yeah, exactly. I just gotta lower your microphone volume there real quick, Keith. Don't worry about it. All right, folks. Hey everybody. Hey you, and welcome. This is a brand new, well, I don't know if it's new, maybe it's old, episode of the That Chapter podcast. I am here. It is currently March of 2025.
It is, yeah. Where's the time going, man?
It was Paddy's Day, just gone.
It was,
Keith, did you get up to much?
I did. Went out drinking.
Nice.
It was, well, I didn't go out on Paddy's Day, because that's always crap. But I went out on a Sunday the night before, and
Very
had
good.
a lot of fun.
You did?
I did.
Good for you.
Yeah, it was great crack, yeah.
Had some, dare I say, a cheeky pint of Guinness, perhaps?
Had a few pints of Guinness, yeah.
Keith, don't go crazy on me.
Berate the DJ for a while, looking for songs.
You do?
Did you
play my music now?
That was nice.
Smashing a glass into his head. What were you requesting? Iron Maiden?
What was it? I asked for... No, I kind of...
Slipknot, any of the bands we've talked about. Funeral for a Friend, perhaps.
Yeah, no, they are good ones. They're more for house parties, I find.
Okay.
You kind of need to play to the public a little bit. Because I've asked for them before and they just go, no, there's not a chance. So you need to kind of, like, a bit of Teenage Dirtbag. That's always a classic.
Okay, yeah.
That's always a bit of crack.
Yeah.
Mr. Brightside, The Killers, always get a good bop out of that.
You don't need to ask for these songs. These are songs that most DJs will play.
I like the power.
Okay, right. Yeah.
I'll say, I know I was going to play it.
I know you're going to play it next, but I just want you to know I told you to play it.
I was the one that said it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I want everyone to know.
All right. Well, Keith, before we get into the episode, any spooky happenings?
No spooky happenings in the house, man.
Damn, dude.
Yeah, none.
What's going on?
Sorry. You might hear me cough a little bit during this episode. It's because I haven't got a cold. I just nearly poisoned myself in the house earlier on with chili.
I did notice you kind of like stumbling in. You've got a very sickly pallor to your complexion.
Thank you.
More so than usual.
That's just my normal complexion.
Yeah.
No, I was making soup for lunch. And usually I like to toast a couple of chili flakes beforehand.
Yeah.
Forgot all about it. And then they start burning the kitchen. And I assume I created some sort of like mace effect within my kitchen.
Toxic miasma, perhaps.
Yeah.
Pepper spray. Essentially, you invented homemade pepper spray,
Pretty
bro.
much. Yeah, so that was about 12:30. It's 7:30 now and I'm still coughing.
Damn,
so
you're a dumb motherfucker.
got
You're
me
right
good. I still made the soup with the same chilies and it was good though.
Well, you smell great,
Thank
if
you.
anything. Very spicy.
Spicy meat. Yeah, boy.
So for Mike's housekeeping, folks at home, I know they're always eagerly awaiting Mike's horror movie reviews. And boy, oh boy, have I got some doozies for you today, folks. I got 2.
Excited.
So I'm going to talk about 2 movies today. The first movie I'm very, very excited to talk about.
Okay.
I'm so excited to talk about this.
Man, you've got like a big shit-eating grin on your
I
face.
do. I really do have a big shooting grin. Let the record show. Because the movie I watched was absolutely shite.
Okay.
It was so bad. Okay, so...
Was it so bad it was good?
No,
Oh,
it was so
okay.
bad. It's very rare I get, like, visibly angry. That's what the movie made me. So the movie was called Lovely, Dark and Deep.
Okay, never heard of it.
Came out 2020, I think last year, 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh man, it was one of those movies I was like, it's still going, and I started to get mad. It was still going. It was like the never-ending movie.
Right.
So the plot of the movie is it's set in a national park, some national park in, I'm guessing it's supposed to be California or somewhere like that. And the main character is a national park ranger.
Okay.
It's basically whoever wrote this movie has been reading a lot of those Reddit national park horror stories, missing 411 type shit.
Right.
They even one point the character opens a book and it's the missing 411 book.
Okay.
And it's just like rolls your fucking eyes.
Okay.
So she's a park ranger. She's in a backcountry, which is like the very remotest parts of the park. And she's there. You're never really exactly sure why. Like, the movie has no fucking plot at all.
Okay, right.
It's literally like woods, spooky, the movie, and like you don't really know anything that's happening,
right.
why anything is happening, or why you should care about anything that's happening.
Yeah.
So she's going into the main character. She's a ranger, but this is her first time in the backcountry. Her sister went missing in a national park when she was a kid.
Okay.
And so I guess she went to be a ranger, and then you see her in her tent, and she has a map of the park, and she's like tracking strange events events that have been
Right.
happening, which
Okay.
you don't really care, or they're not spooky. It's just dumb.
Okay, right.
It's a very fucking dumb movie. There's no plot to the movie at all. It's her just like wandering around and like very lame shit happens.
Okay. Is it like the director is like, I want to do a movie in a spooky forest and it will write itself. And then it didn't.
That's literally
Okay.
it. Yeah, you can definitely tell whoever wrote this also is a big fan of like internet horror stories. The stuff that I and you and probably a lot of our listeners, like if you watch this movie, you will be like, oh, that's a reference, or I've seen that on a YouTube video, like one of those YouTube horror shorts.
Oh, okay.
I've seen that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They definitely can tell that.
Yeah.
It's just very heavily inspired by like the Missing 4-in-1.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the Missing
Yes.
4-in-1, it's a load of shit. But it's really dumb. It just made me viscerally angry watching the movie.
Okay, yeah.
I hated it. I hated everything about it, honestly. And the thing is, there's like, it could have been a good movie because like I love national park horror stories. I even do a series. Like I actually watched it after I was writing because I do a series on like, you know, murders and spooky disappearances in national parks. Like there's so many real stories that are actually really, really cool. Or well, not cool, but you know what I mean? Like scary. It's a great story. So I was like, oh, I'll watch this movie, and then it just like goes off the deep end into this like stupid supernatural bullshit. But it's not even scary. It's not like there's a monster. Like The Ritual, you know, that horror movie that's set in like a forest. That's a great horror movie. Or The Blair Witch Project. There's a million horror movies that are set in the woods that are great. This is most definitely not one of them.
Okay, right.
I'm actually getting mad just thinking about it. So I think I should go to my second movie. Let me talk about my second movie, which is not quite a horror movie, but it's horror adjacent.
Okay.
It's a documentary titled American Movie. It came out in 1999, so it's very 90s, so I already like it.
Yeah.
So it's a documentary following this guy named Mark, who's making his own horror movie.
Okay, cool.
It's really, really like an old, low budget.
Yeah.
He's like in Wisconsin and he's like making this horror movie. He's like he's like a young fella like with a mullet. His best friend named Mike is exactly like a heavy version of you.
Okay.
He even plays guitar and he looks like you.
Okay, right.
But it's great. He's like, yo, I'm gonna have the movie and the movie's gonna be shot, and boy, oh boy, you're not gonna see a movie like this.
Right.
And it's like, you know, he just comes out with like some amazing. It's really like I was watching. I thought it was a mockumentary at times. I had to check twice while I was watching it, and it's following him as he's making the movie, doing the casting. He's extorting his like his crypt keeper like uncle for money, and he's like, you know, this is going to be your movie. You're going to give me $40,000, and he's like, he pulls out this folder and like yawns as he's doing it, as if he's got nothing better to do.
Yeah.
And he pulls out like it's like a 1-page, I guess, treatment of the movie with pictures of hot women attached, and he's like, check it out. What do you think? As if like they're going to be in the movie.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's like, they're going to be in your movie. It's hilariously, it's a brilliant movie. Just slice of life. It's just great characters. It's a really like unintentionally hilarious movie. Just for the real people who are in it. So there you go, folks. That's Mike's movie reviews for today. 2 very different movies, and I feel very strongly about both.
Yeah.
Plus side, American movie. Go find it. I watched it on Prime. And don't, and I actually mean don't, watch Lovely, Dark and Deep. I thought it was just awful.
Okay.
This is a terrible movie. And there you go, folks. So that's honestly, that's the strongest endorsements from Mike's horror movie reviews thus far in completely opposite directions.
I feel you've accidentally sold me the first movie because I want to watch how bad it is.
But it's not bad in a good way. It's just bad in a shit way. Like, it's not like, oh, this is great. You're drinking beers and you're laughing at it. This is just like... Bad, as in I legitimately feel like I wasted life watching it. Like, you know? And I never usually feel that. Like, I actually was getting angry. I'm like sitting there contemplating my inevitable death, watching this movie, thinking I should be enjoying the sunshine right now.
Were you just waiting for it to change at some point?
I was, I know. I literally, well, I was like, you know, I gotta stick it out. And then I was thinking, well, I should, you know, I'll talk about it on the podcast. But it just kept on going.
It's getting worse and worse.
Yeah. And then it just sort of ends.
Right.
It ends in... I'm not even really sure how it ends. It just sort of does, and then she goes back to the park again.
Oh, okay, right. So she's still a park ranger.
Yeah, she's still a park ranger.
I can visually see you getting angry.
I know, I'm getting red. Folks, I have tears in my eyes. I'm getting red in the
so
face.
mad.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I'm not mad about, though, is today's episode of the That Chapter podcast. We are talking about a story which is quite an unusual one.
It is,
It's a good one. I actually am quite excited because we've done, I think the last episode was Tony Costa, the Cape Cod Vampire, a little bit dark. I don't mean that in a bad way. We do talk dark stuff here, but this one I think is not quite as, you know, eating people, cutting off tits, that kind of shit.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like, it gets really dark out. Yeah. Today's one is very spooky, but in a very different way. Today we're talking about, aliens. Folks,
are.
it's all about aliens. Finally, it's actually been a while since we did an alien podcast.
Was the last one the Hopkinsville?
Kelly Hopkinsville incident, which was like
And we
at
actually mentioned
least...
this. We mentioned this story in it.
Did we?
Briefly. Yeah.
Wow, I totally forgot. Okay, well, that was like well over a year ago, I think. So today is the story of Ziggy Stardust, Zigmund Adamski. It has it all: aliens, unexplained phenomena, men in black, and, dare I say, murder. My folks, murder most fell. So today we are visiting the teeny tiny town of Tingley in West York. Come on, up, Bob, West Yorkshire. That's my attempt at a Northern English accent.
Pretty good.
Thank you. I'm trying.
You are getting
That's
better.
the main thing.
You
I'm
are
trying.
getting better.
So geographically, Tingley is right between the cities of Leeds and Wakefield in northern England. Yorkshire, it's a historic county as a whole, and Tingley is no different. Like many villages in northern England, the majority of the menfolk, the good people at Tingley, they work in mining, or they did. Back at this time, they did a mine.
The mines. They dug too greedily and too deep.
They did, actually.
Yeah,
No
they
joke.
did. Yeah.
And one of those miners who worked in Tingley was a Zigmund Adamski, who would unknowingly end up at the center of a decades-long mystery that makes him the subject of today's whole episode. In 1980, 56-year-old Zigmund worked at the Lofthouse Colliery.
Sure.
Yeah, sure, that's Zigmund. A colliery is a fancy word for mine, and the buildings around the mines, folks, just in case you weren't familiar with that word, because I sure ain't. 7 years before Zigmund became the talk of the town, the colliery itself had been the center of a tragedy. Well, a scandal following the tragedy after a shaft suddenly flooded. The disaster left 7 miners dead, but only one of those bodies was able to be recovered. What happened to the others? Aliens? Maybe,
Who knows?
but probably not. The other 6 became permanently entombed in the water-filled tunnels. Ultimately, the responsibility fell on surveyors who approved the mine shaft after misjudging the distance to another shaft that had been closed down due to flooding. Obviously, the distance between the flooded mine and the one that wasn't a big enough distance, and boom goes the dynamite. So Lofthouse Colliery itself, it was closed down in 1981, if you can believe that, a year after Zigmund Adamski disappeared, folks, into thin, alien-filled air, perhaps.
Spooky. That is my worst fear, by the way. Getting like down one of those mines.
Oh man, you know, it's like that thing I do sometimes, and I believe you do it too, which is watching Cave.
I do, yeah, to freak myself out.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I think we did it once, drunk, and we were like freaking out. We were like shielding our eyes, watching it on YouTube.
I start sweating in heaven. It's
I know.
horrible.
Yeah.
I probably mentioned it before in the podcast, but when we went to the Alby caves before, even it's a tour in Ireland to go see these caves.
Yeah.
And like you can stand it, you walk through. It's made for like hundreds of tourists every single day.
Right.
And I was like freaking out inside of it.
Really? Is
Yeah,
it? Does it get like claustrophobic in there?
Like it's quite. It kind of opens. There's a long passageway, and then it opens up into like a big cavern, which is really cool. But I'm also like, I was like, I need to get out. I don't like this at all. It's a fear that something's going to collapse. Something like the Earth's going to shift and move, and then you're going to be stuck in it. And then it's like, shit.
Yeah, no thank you. So Zygmunt Adamski, our main character for today's story, he was born in Poland in 1923, but he left Poland aged 22 for England. That was in the year 1945 because, you know what I'm talking. I don't need to explain shit to you. You know what I'm talking about, big dog. He did leave it pretty late, though, leaving in 1945.
He did, right?
Pretty good have got out of there a few years earlier.
Yeah.
So 6 years after arriving in the United Kingdom, he met his future wife, Leokadia Lottie Adamski, and her maiden name was Howalska. And Leokadia, hell of a name, but I think we will stick with Lottie, thank you very much. And in recent years, Lottie was a very unwell woman. She suffered from multiple sclerosis and had become wheelchair dependent due to the condition. Zygmunt, too, he had his own health struggles thanks to the years he'd spent in the mines inhaling coal dust. Zygmunt, he had the black lung.
A nasty way to go. I was actually looking up before about the black lung.
Is it real?
The black lung?
Yeah, I just thought it was just like a thing people said about people who work in mines.
No, it's like you're breathing in. It's sort of
coal dust, I guess.
Coal dust. It's kind of like asbestos, and that it's just it's dust kind of getting into your lungs and it sits in your lungs. But it can cause like multiple conditions. But the worst case it can get to, it can actually cause patches of like necrosis in your lungs. So you just have like parts of your lungs just like rotting and dying. Yeah. So it's horrific.
That is no, thank you.
Right? Yeah.
So as a result, I don't know if he actually had the black lung, but That's what I just thought that was a generic word for mining people to get things. But as a result of whatever condition he developed from working down in those mines, Zigmund had applied for early retirement. But the boss man, those bastards, they'd refused him early retirement. So he appealed and he was awaiting the final decision when he went missing. Now, ironically, the letter announcing the decision, it arrived the day after he disappeared. His early retirement had been approved after all. Wink, wink.
Okay.
It actually was approved.
All right, okay.
So June 6th, 1980 was a Friday. Zygmunt Adamski, he left his wife, Lottie, at their home on Thornfield Crescent, a little neighborhood near the main road. He left the house sometime between 3:30 3:45, and this was in order to go to the local store for, a few bits and bobs. On his way there, he bumped into an acquaintance, and the two, they had a brief chat before going their separate ways. According to their friend in question, Zygmunt, he'd been in good spirits that day, and in fact he was really looking forward to his goddaughter's upcoming wedding. Zygmunt, he made it to the shop shortly afterwards, bought a few items, and then left, presumably to return home. And that was the last anyone saw of Zygmunt Adamski for 5 whole days, and that would be the last time anyone saw him alive. The question of where he was and what happened to him in those 5 days, it remains a complete mystery. Despite a large-scale search using police and volunteers from the local community and from his place of work, the Lofthouse Colliery, no sign or trace of Zygmunt could be uncovered. Even psychics were consulted. No one was answering, though, that spectral telephone.
It was like he disappeared off the face of the earth.
Literally off the face of the earth. Very well put. 5 days after Zygmunt had set out on what should have been less than a half-hour, run to the store, he turned up in the last place anyone would have ever expected. It was on June 11th, 1980. 5 days after he left his house, and 5 days to the hour, a call came into police in the town of Todmorden from a man named Trevor Parker. Trevor had been walking through the coal yard he was a co-owner of and had spotted what appeared to be a body. For reference, Todmorden is about an hour due west of Tingley, where Zygmunt had been last seen 5 days earlier. So local police officers Alan Godfrey and Malcolm Hagley responded to the call, where they found the body of Zygmunt Adamski at the top of a pile of coal, roughly 10 feet high. Godfrey and Hagley described it as if the body had dropped from the sky. They couldn't see any way someone could have gotten the body up there without disturbing the scene, immensely. An initial promising theory that Zygmunt's body had been deposited by a truck along with a regular delivery was quickly ruled out when Trevor Parker told the officers on the scene that no deliveries had been made that day, and had been there earlier, he sure as shit would have noticed. In fact, they were in the process of loading a departing truck when the body was found. While the officers were almost certain Ziggy hadn't got where he was under his own power, no cars had been seen on the single-lane unsurfaced road that led to the coal mound. If this was a murder, it was far more likely they were looking for a male perpetrator, maybe even multiple people involved in the disposal of this body in this inexplicable and hard-to-reach place. And the lack of any real obvious route up to the coal pile itself, that may be realistically explained by the nearby train tracks, which could have caused, vibrations, which shook the trail, maybe covering up the tracks, but still it just seemed bizarre. Then, of course, there's the possibility that Godfrey and his partner, maybe they missed something that they themselves had destroyed. Maybe they destroyed potential evidence of the killer's presence in their own rush to scale the pile and render aid to the man at the top. But even still, even if it had, there was clear signs of him being put up there by human hands. Let me just, the record show the pointers come out. It still makes no sense why they would deposit a dead body at the top of a pile of coal.
Yeah, it's very weird. Also, a weird thing, Trevor Parker, so the guy who found the body, he said that initially he'd been walking around the yard that morning at around 8:15 a.m. and he didn't notice anybody then. Ooh. So now it's possible that he missed it, but still very odd. And especially to miss it the first time and then see it the second time, he was going the same route. So weird, yeah, very strange.
And he would have noticed if there was men coming in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
for sure. So you hardcore true crime buffs might recognize the name of the village, Todmorden. That's where none other than where a certain Dr. Harold Shipman, a very famous serial killer, had his first position as a GP. This was a long time before his shenanigans though. The Todmorden coal yard was 30 miles to the southwest of Tingley, so even without taking the distance from Adamski's starting point into consideration, once he arrived there, access to the actual coal yard wasn't at all straightforward and would have presented a hell of a challenge to someone traveling alone on foot, let alone someone pulling or carrying the dead weight of a grown man along with them. So it's not even the fact that he was on top of something strange, a pile of coal, it was even just to get to where the coal was. Everything about this made no sense whatsoever. The make no sense whatsoever part of the story doesn't even end there. There were several notable things about the state of Zygmunt Adamski's body. The first one being a grimace-like expression upon his face. According to Alan Godfrey, the police officer, it was almost a look of shock on his face. His eyes were pinned wide open.
I listened to an interview with Alan Godfrey talking about when he found the body, and he said that the look on his face was of someone being frightened to death.
Ooh.
He said it was horrifying.
Yeah, that's grim. Yet the strangest thing about Adamski's body might have been his clothing. He appeared fully dressed, but up close it became apparent that while he was wearing a jacket, trousers, he was missing his shirt underneath the jacket. Instead, under Adamski's jacket was nothing but a string vest. And string vests, they're literally what they sound like. Think of a fishnet vest, wife beater, as they call them, that kind of thing. A mesh undergarment. It was worn by the poor folk back then. It was a common thing in Yorkshire among older gentlemen up until quite recent days. It's not something that would be commonly worn as an actual shirt. Both Adamski's jacket and suit pants were buttoned incorrectly also, as if whoever had dressed him had either done so in a hurry or just hadn't quite known what they were doing.
I love the ideas of aliens just trying to figure out buttons.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to defeat them.
Yeah,
buttons.
Exactly.
We just encase the world with it in a big button jacket.
It makes more sense than science.
Yeah, right.
So, it's not far off. He was also astonishingly clean for a man lying on top of a pile of coal. His hair was neat and tidy, like it had recently been cut and combed, and Adamski had recently shaved, or had been shaved, as he showed less than a day's stubble worth of growth, which is weird if he'd just been missing for 5. And that's the thing, even if he'd been dead for 5 days earlier, like he'd killed as soon as he disappeared, even when you die, you still grow a beard.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So according to the responders, Adamski's clothing had very little dirt or coal dust on it, as you would expect of a body that was lying at the top of a pile of coal. There was no way Zygmunt had died there. He had to have been placed there after his death. The big question, though, was, of course, why? Why would anyone go to all that trouble to place his body in such a conspicuous and inaccessible location? The answer is still a mystery, but it's far from the only one.
Yeah, I think that's one of the weirdest things. So Godfrey, he stated that there wasn't a single mark of coal on the body, which is so weird. And it was raining at the time as well. So a wet pile of coal is probably a lot more likely to run on your clothes.
Right,
but,
stain, yeah.
And getting a lifeless body on top of a heap of coal without leaving any trace on it, it's nearly impossible. And that's one of the reasons why they said he literally just dropped and landed on the pile of coal.
Yeah.
There's no way he was dragged up or carried up. It was literally dropped and kind of placed on the coal. Really, really weird.
Some reports stated that Adamski's watch was still on his wrist when he was found, and it had stopped at 11:15, which some thought may have indicated his time of death. But in reality, it's impossible to say which day, or even AM or PM, when his watch had stopped. He also just simply could have forgotten to wind it, or, it had unwound itself. And police reports dispute his watch being present. Adamski's body showed no signs of foul play. The only notable thing was something that resembled a burn mark on the back of his head and neck. That had nothing to do with his death, though. According to the coroner, James Turnbull, the examination of Adamski's cause of death, the answer was most likely a heart attack. Technically a combination of ischemic heart disease and emphysema, but was officially recorded as an open verdict regarding the circumstances that might have brought it on. Pretty much the only conclusive verdict that could be ruled out was suicide. We don't know what he did, but he probably didn't do it to himself, basically.
Yeah, there was no like major injuries, like you said, that could have caused death. But another thing that was noted in the post-mortem was these superficial cuts on both his hands and his knees and an abrasion on his right thigh. And these superficial injuries, they were enough for people to start talking and linking the case to another encounter only a year before.
Ooh.
So in 1979, a forestry worker named Robert Taylor, he had an encounter so bizarre that the police investigated it as an assault case.
Wow.
So on November 9th, while checking fences in the Decmont Woods up in Scotland, Taylor, he stumbled across a 30-foot dome-shaped craft while he was in a clearing. Suddenly, these two spiked spheres, they rolled out towards him, they grabbed his legs, and then he just blacked out. He woke up around 20 minutes later, completely disorientated and shaken up, and the UFO, it was gone, but his trousers were completely ripped to bits. There was these strange track-like marks all around him. So Taylor, he was so rattled that on his way home, he crashed his van into a ditch, and then he eventually stumbled his way home in a complete daze, telling his wife that he'd been attacked by a spaceship thing.
That's what a spaceship thing is. What you call it?
That was the quote. A spaceship thing.
Hey, Fox, spaceship thing.
Fucking spaceship thing.
Where's my iron blue?
So the police, they were called, and officers, they treated the case as an actual assault, but they never figured out who or what. Now, investigators, they found 32 strange holes in the clearing, resembling like those that would be left by heavy machinery tracks, but there was nothing in the area that would have matched them. Even Taylor's ripped trousers, they were sent off for forensic analysis, but experts, they ruled out normal wear and tear or anything else. Skeptics, they've thrown in some theories, from hallucinations caused by berries to Venus mirages, but Taylor, he was a well-respected war veteran. He never wavered from his story at all. Some believe he suffered a epileptic episode, though there's no medical evidence of one happening at the time. Even the police admitted that the case, it completely defied all explanation. And the detective who investigated, he couldn't bring himself to call it aliens, but he believed Taylor believed it.
Okay, right. Yeah, so I'm not saying it, but I'm saying it because I know he's thinking it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Decades later, the Decmont Woods, it still has a UFO trail, which brings in visitors to spot where Taylor claimed that he had this out-of-this-world encounter.
Ooh.
But this only happened like a year before, and kind of similar.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is in Yorkshire as well, which is like close to Scotland,
close
so
enough,
they probably would have heard about it and shit. That's crazy. I never heard about that story before.
It's a weird one.
Very interesting. So yeah, there you go. The pants thing and the cuts, maybe it was the same UFO creature.
Could have been, yeah. They're after that right tie.
Yeah. So in addition to his injuries, Adamski's wedding ring, wallet, and keys were also all missing. There was no sign of the items he'd bought from the store on the afternoon he went missing either. I love the bag. Everything's missing, but he's got his little shopping bag with him. It's like bread and milk.
Just on the alien craft, just the milk and butter in the fridge.
Yeah. So usually that would have been enough to mark the death as a robbery gone wrong. But too much of the other evidence didn't align with that theory. It's highly unlikely anyone would be kidnapped for 5 whole days, during which he appeared to have been well fed. It did seem like he was alive for at least a significant amount of time after he disappeared from Tingley. Zygmunt Adamski also seemed to have been treated for his injuries, but with what? No one could say. Whoever had been with him had applied a gel-like substance with a green tint to it, almost like a salve for, burn marks or something like that. The substance was unidentified at the time, and sadly no samples have survived. So that leaves us with only wild speculation, which we do love, and best guesses. The burn itself, the one at the back of his head, it was a couple of days old and it had already, begun to heal over. Again, he'd likely been alive for quite some time, which also certainly rules out the idea of Adamski being tortured. After all, who would kidnap a man, torture him, and then try to heal the wounds that they had inflicted upon him? Didn't make any sense whatsoever, whatever had happened to him. The local community's reaction was natural. Rumors of a bizarre murder ritual were rife. It didn't take long at all, though, for the more sensible, if a little glamorized and satanic panicky, basically to fall off into much more imaginative territory. And now we get the good stuff.
Yeah, that's where we live.
Yeah. So to say the newspapers had a field day with the story was a big understatement. The case eventually gained a huge amount of national attention. Just over a year later, Zygmund's story appeared splashed across the front page of the Sunday Mirror national newspaper on September 27, 1981, under the heading, "Amazing UFO Death Riddle." No prizes for guessing what the leading theory was, and it's a hell of a theory.
Right? What a heading for a newspaper.
Yeah.
But once the media, they got a hold of it, people, they start putting other strange sightings together as well, which seemed a bit too coincidental to not be related.
Yes.
So on the 6th of June, so when Adamski disappeared from Tingley, so we already know that. Then the 7th of June, there was a ball of orange light in the sky, and that was reported in Bradford. So about 30 minutes, just like a little north from Tingley.
Mm-hmm.
The 8th of June, orange lights were seen in Todmorden and Halifax, so an hour from Tingley.
Whoa.
Then the 9th and 10th of June, lights were recorded in the sky again in South Bradford. And on the 11th of June, Adamski's body was found.
Wow. So the aliens were doing loops. They were Mario Kart in the sky, if you will. They were going crazy up there.
It was wild, yeah. I think it's also worth noting that these sightings, they're just a drop in the bucket when it comes to strange events happening around the Pennines, which is... So the Pennines is like, it's a rugged mountainous range. It's often called like the backbone of England.
Okay.
If you kind of see, it's right in the middle of England, and it's like a mountain range that kind of runs down the centre. It literally looks like the backbone of England.
Okay.
There's towns and cities, including Tingley, Bradford and Halifax, and they're scattered throughout this region around the mountainous range, and they're hotspots for UFO activity.
Whoa.
Dating all the way back to 1971.
It's interesting. So it's got mines in these hills, this kind of area too? Because Tingley was like a mining town.
Yeah.
It's kind of like England's Appalachia.
Yes.
It's got UFOs, mines.
It's like the Nahanni Valley thing.
Yeah, that's
cool.
cool. Folks, any listeners from, what do you call them, the Pennines?
The Pennines, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Call in. Tell us your UFO stories. We know you have them.
Now, like, I guess, like, here's the thing about this story. If you don't believe in aliens, that's fine. You just need to believe in UFOs, which is something entirely different. Mm-hmm. So for years, countless sightings of unidentified objects were recorded in this region. And that's just a fact. And these aren't just like mad people spouting off, going out the tabloids. These are like reports from like policemen and everything who've seen all these reports from pilots, people like upstanding citizens within society. It's crazy amount of reports that are around this area. So like forget the little green men. Real people kept seeing something in the sky over and over that they couldn't explain. One strange wave of sightings became known as the mystery copter phenomenon.
Mystery copter, okay.
So this all started in 1973 with reports of a helicopter-like object that definitely wasn't a helicopter started to be seen around these areas. One of the first known accounts was reported on May 10th, 1973, when a couple was parked on a hill above Oldham. And this was a popular spot at the time for,
good old dogging.
Yeah. But at 9:15 p.m, their night took a bit of a turn when a strange craft appeared. So it looked like a helicopter, except it was dome-shaped, it was made of glass, it was eerily silent, and it hovered above them, and it had these red, green, and white lights flashing throughout these metallic slits. It hovered over them for about, I think it was like 10-15 minutes before suddenly just zipping away into the darkness at this incredibly high speed.
Wow.
And this was just the beginning. Throughout the year, more and more reports flooded in. As I said, like not just from couples sneaking off into the moors for, dropping the hand, but from police officers too, who were also dropping that. But now, while aliens weren't everyone's first guess, the theories, they were just as wild. Some thought they were part of an illegal immigration operation, while others suspected...
Illegal immigrants are coming in on helicopters. They're probably doing all right. Like.
Yeah. There was others that suspected it was actually linked to the IRA, smuggling in weapons.
The lads.
Right, the lads, yeah. A very different kind of little green men, but also ones you don't really want to meet. But sightings of strange lights in the sky, they continued for years. And then they took a turn in 1980 when Zygmunt Adamski died in such a bizarre, unexplainable way that the only logical conclusion seemed to be that he fell from the sky, which is what we said. Which is why all these events started being connected by people. Yeah. Of course, they might not be connected at all. The human mind is wired to, see patterns even when they don't exist. We do it in a way, to make sense of the world. But I don't know, let's be honest, these events, they seem like one heck of a coincidence to not be related.
It's crazy. That is a lot of weird shit, especially just all the lights that we're seeing in the sky at this, like during this specific week in this like specific region of England. It's cuckoo pants.
They always came in waves, so that's why it started in 1971, then you get like these waves and bursts. They always seem to happen around winter time. All these reports would be huge waves and then like nothing for a while, and then you get another wave. But yeah, when Adamski, when his body was found, there was a huge wave of sightings. Wow. But very strange, yeah.
So more down to earth, because we'll get back to that in a bit, but still with a tinge of the outlandish, was the idea that our Ziggy had been the victim of a secret KGB hit squad. Pretty much like the only thing that this particular conspiracy had going for it was that Zigmund was Polish and had fled his war-torn homeland to escape the German-Soviet invasion. Things like that do happen, for sure. It's very obvious assassination. The Russians love assassinating people, but it's very unlikely that they would assassinate Zygmunt Adamski, who had left Poland when he was only 22. He had no military or intelligence background, so the chances of him being a Comrade-Born-style asset were slim to none. Like any of those other conspiracy theories, I don't know. It just goes back to aliens, folks. I want to believe. Yeah. The theory that Zygmunt's own employers was also another conspiracy, that the lads at the Lofthouse Colliery may have had, something to do with his death. Some people also, raised that as a line of thinking, and that was based on the approval of Zygmunt's early retirement, which of course he never knew about, disappearing the day before the letter arrived. So the early retirement was based on his physical health, and that would have cost the company money. Companies don't like it when you cost them money, folks. So was it enough for them to not only kill him, but also to make a very public statement warning off anyone else from pursuing the same course of action? Likely not. That and the fact that, a message is kind of pointless if nobody knows who sent it. So, yeah, we'll get him. Nobody else will pursue early retirement. But they don't know what that's... Yeah, okay. Shit. Nobody knows it was us. But again, rumor mill got hold of that idea. Speculation started. And suddenly, the idea that Zygmunt was a secret whistleblower who had discovered something deep in the mines. Ooh, again, greedily and deep. But probably not. So... all serious inquiries into that particular idea, they went nowhere at all. So 3 months after Zygmunt's death, he was bumped from the headlines by a much more definitively terrestrial evil when police arrested the man who the press called the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe. Naturally, Sutcliffe's name was the one on everyone's lips, as a result of the shift in attention, even among the detectives tasked with investigating the tragedy of Adamski's death. It had almost become accepted that his death would sadly remain unsolved. Resources were needed elsewhere. It wouldn't be long at all, though, before UFOs were at the center of town gossip and rumor once again. And you'll be shocked to hear that reports of UFO sightings skyrocketed after Zygmunt's death, but also after his disappearance before anyone even knew he was gone. It was in the rain-soaked early morning hours of Friday, November 28, 1980, so not terribly long after Zygmunt died, that 33-year-old Alan Godfrey, the police officer who found him, was on duty as usual when a call came in from a local farmer reporting a herd of cows had gone missing. The initial call of missing cows was in fact followed by several more, this time from residents concerned about a bunch of cows that seemed to be happily roaming freely around the village. Godfrey was on his way in his car to the spot where the latest cow sighting had taken place, when he had an unusual encounter of his own, only it definitely wasn't of the bovine variety. Suddenly, something up ahead on the road in the near distance, it caught Godfrey's attention. At first, he thought it was just a large vehicle in the darkness of the early morning. As he got closer, though, the shape became more clear, yet he still couldn't recognize what he was looking at. Whatever the object was, it was large, resembling a bus in size. It was diamond-shaped, and maybe most intriguingly of all, seemed to be hovering a few feet from the ground. Now, sadly, we're far back in the time before everyone had a high-definition 4K-capable camera in their pocket. But that doesn't mean we don't have an image of what Godfrey saw that evening. So protocol at the time dictated that officers attending the scenes of traffic collisions and certain crimes should try their best to sketch the scene in case it could be used later. So Alan started drawing what he was looking at, but he never finished it.
Just like 2 sides of a triangle. I'll get back to it later.
He never finished it because, as he described it later, there was a brilliant, white, blinding flash of light. He likened it to a camera's flashlight, like going off right in front of your face. Suddenly, in a literal flash, Godfrey was no longer in his stationary car on Burnley Road. Now he was moving, driving back towards the Todmorden police station, having no idea of how he had got to where he was. According to his own watch, several minutes had passed since he was sitting in his car in front of the mystery object. Godfrey immediately whipped the car around and returned to where he had seen it. The object was gone, leaving only a patch of dry tarmac where it had been hovering. Weirder yet, Alan was drawn to his foot by a persistent itch that, when he went to scratch it, he realized it was being caused by a red rash on his ankle that had not been there the day before. He also realized that his boots appeared scuffed and that his left boot was badly ripped, as though he had been dragged along the concrete with his feet scraping the ground behind him, like he had been taken.
Yeah, right? Very weird.
Alan Godfrey was well known in Todmorden thanks to his involvement in the very recent Zigmund Adamski case, so he was already quite used to hearing people's unsolicited speculation about aliens and UFOs. But after the events of that night, aliens and UFOs would take over his life more than he ever thought possible.
The missing time element from his stories and like multiple stories I've heard, like it just comes up time and time again when we talk about these UFO encounters. And I find like the creepiest element of it, just, you know, like, oh, just like I was back on the road and I don't know where 15 minutes went. There was a really well-known example of this. It was called the Allagash abductions. Have you heard this?
Very briefly.
It's cool. And so it's one of the most well-known UFO cases out there. It's
in Maine?
Yeah. So it all started with twin brothers, Jim and Jack Wiener, and their two friends, Chuck Rack and Charlie Foltz. And they were on a canoe trip in Maine's Allagash Wilderness in August 1976. So one night while they were fishing on Eagle Lake, they saw a massive glowing sphere hovering above the treetops. When they decided to flash an SOS signal at it, just in case it was something that needed help, the UFO started to move towards them and it shined a bright beam of light directly on their canoe. And then nothing. The next memory they had was they were rowing back to shore, paddling towards their now dying bonfire, which they set up this huge bonfire beforehand so they could, you know, find a way back, and it was meant to last like several hours. And they had no memory of how they got there, and the UFO was completely gone. So years later, Jack, he started having nightmares of being levitated into a craft and examined by strange beings. Then under hypnosis, all four recalled the same abduction experience, being taken on board, examined, and then returned as if nothing happened. Their detailed accounts and sketches, they all eerily lined up. And then also adding to the mystery, like the bonfire they built, as I said, it was meant to burn for hours, and that had been reduced down to nothing but embers by the time they got back. So that suggested that the time that had passed was at least several hours. So the Allagash abductions, it remains one of the most famous missing time cases in UFO history. I actually had a similar experience when I was camping in Muskoka, Ontario. The last thing I remember was loading 52 beers into a car, and then nothing but Monday.
Blacked out.
Just black out, yeah. Browned out that weekend.
I think there's some dangerous aliens in those mountains, all right? Gotta be careful. Yeah. Allagash, good beer.
Good beer? Oh, yeah.
I do. I'm a fan. So, back to Alan Godfrey and his version of the Allagash, after maybe he had too many Allagashes. But it'd be wrong to ignore the alternate possibilities for Godfrey's experience that early morning. It was in the very early morning, you know, with the very wee hours. He was tired. Your eyes tend to play tricks on you at the witching hour, the hour of the wolf, as they say. He'd also been under an extreme amount of stress given his position at the center of the recent unsolved Adamski case. He'd gotten used to even his own colleagues mocking him at work, jokingly referring to him as Captain Kirk, and it was a joke Alan didn't really appreciate very much. The bright flash of light plus the memory loss are both indications of a possible epileptic episode or even a minor stroke, but Alan wasn't tested for these at the time. The favourite and most enduring theory is still the wildest and the best.
It's the only one that makes sense in my opinion.
I agree. Alan was a happily married father of two and had been a police officer in Todmorden his whole life. He had a reputation as a man who didn't suffer fools or silly buggers, as he put it. Godfrey was a typical Yorkshireman, a straight-up talker, little time for faffing about. After the incident, Alan's life pretty much fell apart. So he's not a guy whose life should be falling apart. He was a very straight shooter.
Yep.
Well, not anymore. He struggled with alcoholism from then on. Felt like he became a laughing stock of the village. It even cost him his job with the police. Up until then, Alan had a spotless track record and was considered a good officer and a good man. Afterwards, though, his superiors felt he had lost all credibility, despite never himself claiming to have experienced anything to do with aliens at this point. As far as Alan was concerned, he had merely reported exactly what he had experienced, honestly and to the best of his knowledge. He just described what happened. Others said it was aliens.
Yeah, I think this alone just like, it's pretty good evidence that he was telling the truth. Why would he say all this?
Yeah.
When it was clearly detrimental to his career and his marriage and his health.
Yeah.
At one point, like, no, it didn't happen. But he was so like gung ho, like, this definitely happened. I need to get word out. Yeah, I don't think he's definitely not lying. He's very credible.
Yeah, if his life starting to fall apart, he'd be like, okay, maybe it didn't happen, or maybe I should just shut up talking about it. The fact he didn't. Alan was pretty unfairly singled out, and he was far from alone in what he experienced. Todmorden, as Keith, you actually talked about earlier, it has its own unique history when it comes to UFOs or UAPs, unidentified atmospheric phenomenon. It was unknown to Alan Godfrey at the time, but there had actually been several more calls regarding something strange, usually lights in the skies of Todmorden and the Pennines leading up to his own close encounter. Keith, we went through them already. One of those reports came from Godfrey's police colleagues over in Halifax. 3 officers had been out looking for a stolen motorbike when they'd seen a series of bright lights moving unnaturally in the night sky. The officers reported the sighting to the Ministry of Defense, and they apparently ruled out basically it being anything military or civilian. They would say that, I suppose, wouldn't they? Oh yeah, that's just our new top secret jet that we just invented, by the way. Keep it to yourselves, lads.
Don't mind that.
But the Halifax officers weren't the only ones to report something strange in the skies above this part of the UK. I'd love to give you a list of all the sightings over the years. Since Tingley and Todmorden, that would take a hell of a long time, though. Alan certainly seemed to have believed that the government had at least some level of involvement in what he saw that early morning. Alan Godfrey claimed he even received a letter addressed from the University of Moscow. The Russians even, the KGB are looking into his experience. They were basically asking him, tell us about what happened. Alan did as he should. He handed the letter over to his superiors. This was right in the middle of the Cold War, and the letter originated from beyond the Iron Curtain. Maybe the University of Moscow lads were like, yo, tell us about that secret jet you wink wink saw. Instead of gratitude and trust, though, Alan was met with suspicion when he handed this letter over. Even a man in black. One day, Alan was pulled into his boss's, the station inspector's office, and was confronted by a man only identified as the man from the ministry. Alan said that the man had a file with him, which when he opened revealed it contained details of the Zigmund Adamski case, including Alan's very own sketch. The man stated, this is 2 lines. My art!
Can I get a copy of that?
The man stated that he was there on behalf of the government and ordered Alan Godfrey, under threat of prosecution by the Official Secrets Act, to keep quiet and not say another word to the press. Alan left the police force in 1984, 4 years after the Zigmund Adamski murder unfolded. He was never able to shake off the events, though, and struggled greatly for years. He bounced from job to job, first as a butcher, then a security guard. Nothing stuck. In 1988, he split with his first wife, eventually remarrying his second wife, who he claimed saved him. With his life completely invaded, I don't blame Godfrey at all for leaning into the whole thing after a while and trying to make lemonade while the sun shines. I mean, hey, you gotta pay the bills at the end of the day.
That's it, yeah.
Really was a smart thing to do. For the longest time, he did deny believing his experiences or that of Adamski had anything to do with aliens. That just ruined his life. So then he was like, after a while, I was like, well, saying it wasn't aliens, people find me less trustworthy and believable, and they're firing me. It was aliens, folks. I knew it the whole time. Even when I said it wasn't aliens, it was aliens. Like you said, Keith, his own skepticism showed that he wasn't one to make mountains out of molehills. But after a while, he was like, yeah, fuck it. Okay, it was aliens after all.
Yeah. Like it is sad. He did all the right things, and he got screwed for it. But yeah, go for it, man.
That all, his denials went all out the window when Alan's hypnotic regression became public. And that's when things got a little bit crazy, folks. Alan had undergone hypnosis in order to try and retrieve the memory loss of those missing minutes from November 1980 when he saw this bright flashing light. While under, Godfrey recounted getting out of his patrol car and approaching the craft. When he was just a few feet away, a beam of light hit his chest, and he suddenly felt completely weightless as he was pulled on board. He was confronted by a 6-foot-tall humanoid alien who spoke to Alan telepathically, introducing himself as Yosef. Godfrey even said that he felt safe in the presence of the alien, almost like they knew each other. Joseph asked him to lay on a long table, and as he lay there, 7 to 8 smaller aliens, each with a large bulb-shaped head, entered the room and began to perform tests and experiments on him. Eventually, the aliens stopped their testing, telling Godfrey that they were worried he might have a heart attack. Alan also described a dog-like alien in the room while the experiments were going on. Now, consciously, Alan couldn't recall any of this, and when he commented on the hypnosis sessions later, he believed the whole thing was just him remembering a dream he had. He even said he had been reading a book on the John and Betsy Russell abduction, at the time, and the Russell abduction was one of the first and most thoroughly documented close encounters. Curiously, when the Ministry of Defense released all of its files on UFO sightings into the publicly available National Archives, Alan's experiences were not among them. He put this down to the West Yorkshire Police never passing on the reports he made. Further, Alan suspects that the man from the ministry was in fact just one of West Yorkshire's own, masquerading as some kind of spook in order to shut him up and save them from further embarrassment. But the thing was, Alan didn't seem like he was the one who wanted the embarrassment.
Right?
Yeah. But I guess his hypnosis session came out and he was like, guess what? It was aliens the whole time. Should have known.
Yeah, buy my book.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, I was reading a book at the time about aliens and I may have been dreaming that too. But you never know. Could have been aliens. Regardless of books or movie deals, Alan Godfrey remains a skeptical old Yorkshire copper at heart and still believes that Adamski's killer was very much human. He blames the alien stuff for getting in the way of a proper and thorough investigation. No one has ever been arrested on suspicion of Zigmund's murder. As for the official investigation, the leading theory was that he was killed because of a family dispute he'd been embroiled in. The specifics of Adamski's family dispute pretty hard to actually discern, which is why we haven't really brought it up. But the gist is that Zigmund and his wife, Lottie, had inadvertently found themselves right in the middle of a family feud after they'd taken in a relative whose marriage was on the rocks. Rumors of domestic violence were rife, making the likelihood that the angered husband may have had something to do with Ziggy's death made it even more probable. Maybe they had taken in a woman, a wife, and her husband had just been so angry at Ziggy and his wife taking her in that he murdered him. But it still doesn't explain the myriad issues with his death himself and the unsolved mystery of it. I don't know. It's bizarre. The woman, by the way, they took in even had a court order against her husband that ordered he stay away from her under threat of arrest. So who knows if he did kill Zigmund, but I am skeptical. Ultimately, though, the killer of Zigmund got lucky. They placed his body where they thought the evidence would be easily washed away. But the oddness of it was just enough that the alien theory sprung up and grabbed the public's attention. Placed the body where they thought the evidence would be washed away on top of a coal pile.
I know, right? Yeah, you're placing it out there. You're literally putting it on a pedestal.
Exactly, yeah. Why not dump it down one of these mine shafts?
Yeah, right.
There's a million other places if you want to hide a body. Not. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably the most realistic theory if he was murdered, but it just it's an amazing achievement how they did it because nothing makes sense in this.
It's very strange.
And it costs Alan Godfrey his career.
Yeah. I read a really interesting book about it. It was called The Pennine UFO Mystery, and it's a solid read. So it just lays out the facts of what happened, and it also offers alternative explanations that don't involve aliens.
Ooh.
It does lean heavily into aliens.
Well, that's the good stuff.
Right, yeah. But it's also but it could be this, could have been this.
Okay.
But it's good, and it's a very fair book. But there was one section of the book that I thought was really interesting. So it talks about kind of how easily it is to link events together to create a mystery, even when there's no actual connection that exists. And it gives a perfect example of this. So there was this case, it was called Stefan Skarbinski, which happened just 2 years after Adamski, and it was only an hour drives away.
Okay.
Skarbinski, he was 64 years old when he disappeared while walking home from the shops. A few days later, workers at an old factory where he used to work before taking early retirement, they found his body lying on a pile of sand inside of a hopper.
What's a hopper?
It's like a giant dispenser, I think. Thing.
Okay.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. If I showed you a photo, it's like basically a big kind of cylinder filled with
right. Yeah, I know what you
grain
mean.
or sand
Yeah.
or something. Yeah.
So this story is sounding very similar.
Very, very similar. Yeah. So it was found inside a hopper. When they went to remove him, they discovered that he was badly decomposed and dismembered. So as I said, yeah, very, very, very familiar. Very like.
But the opposite. Like Zigmund was like perfectly fresh.
He was perfectly fine.
This guy was like ripped up.
Yeah, I think they found him like a little later.
Okay.
But after investigation, they did eventually rule his death as suicide. The theory is that he was hanging inside the hopper for some time before his body eventually fell onto the sand below.
Okay.
His ex-wife later confirmed that he had been deeply depressed, struggling with personal issues and the political turmoil in Poland at the time.
Mm-hmm.
His family assumed that he'd just gone back to Poland until his body had been found. But nobody connected this case to Adamski's at the time. But it was just like a small little news item. I guess it was because it was resolved. They said it was suicide. It wasn't an unexplained death. Looking back, you can see how easily someone could have forced a connection in order to create like a deeper mystery for the Adamski case. It's the same region, similar circumstances, strange details. You could easily spin it into, say, it was like the work of aliens, a company punishing those for early retirees, or even some kind of secret international assassination. But I don't think that's what happened. I think it was just a tragic event with eerie similarities. But it just highlighted how quickly rumors could spread when a story takes off from the media and people start drawing links between things that don't really have a connection. I kind of mentioned earlier, sometimes we see patterns because we want to see them, because it makes a better story. Coincidences, they do happen. But then again, some coincidences are just too strange to ignore.
Like in the case of Zigmund Adamski.
That's it.
All right, there you go, folks. That is the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a wild one, out of this world. Yeah, all right, that was a fun story.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good.
I like those ones that are a little bit different. All right, that'll wrap up today's episode.
That's it.
You will hear from me and the dulcet tones of Keith very, very soon.
All right.
Main episodes are up every single Monday on the podcast, so that's the numbered episodes, and then every Friday is like a bonus episode. It'll either be listener stories or an audio from a YouTube video, that I think would make a good podcast episode. I usually will record a new intro and be like, hey, if you haven't heard of this. One of the reasons why I wanted to start doing that, because I've noticed that there's a good contingent of podcast listeners who don't watch YouTube or anything. So it's it's kind of cool. Then here's all the other shit that's been on that chapter over the years. So give it a go. But yeah, wow.
Creepy story, man. I think the key takeaway is wear lots of buttons, because aliens, they just can't get them.
Yes, there you
They're
go.
too fidgety.
Exactly. Button up, folks. Button the hell up. Button the shit up. Button that ass up. All right. Thanks so much for listening, folks. Bye.
I'll see you.